In our headlines on this Monday afternoon, July 8th, here in South Korea. President Yoon is heading to the US today to partake in a number of defense-related events, including the NATO Summit, amid North Korea's military collaboration with Russia and the latter's ongoing aggression in Ukraine. And South Korea's health authorities are poised to unveil their latest measures in response to the prolonged walkout by doctors in training, engaged in collective action against plans to boost medical school admissions quota. Meanwhile, a left-wing coalition is taking the most seats in the French parliament after Sunday's voting kept the far right away from power, but the absence of an absolute majority has pundits concerned about the future. President Yoon departs for the U.S. on this Monday to attend a number of security-related events, including the NATO Summit in Washington, D.C. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon has a preview of the agenda ahead.
For the third year in a row, President Yoon will attend the NATO Summit being held this year in Washington, D.C. The president will leave for the U.S. on Monday, a few days earlier than the summit's start date, to stop off in Hawaii to visit the United States Indo-Pacific Command.
The summit's held in Washington, D.C., where the North Atlantic Treaty was signed on April 4, 1949, marking the founding of NATO, carries historical significance. Considering the importance of cooperation with the Indo-Pacific region, NATO has extended invitations to the IP4 nations, South Korea, Japan, Australia and New Zealand, for 3 consecutive years.
As for the brief itinerary, arriving in Hawaii on Monday, he will go straight to pay his respects at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, informally known as the Punch Bowl, where around 10,000 Korean War veterans and their family members have been laid to rest, along with servicemen and servicewomen from World War II and the Vietnam War. On Tuesday, he's set to visit the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, where he will be briefed by the commander regarding ongoing security issues in the region.
Since 2018, when the U.S. Pacific Command became the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, this is the first time for a South Korean president to visit the headquarters. The visit will showcase the strong solidarity of the ROK-US alliance and serve as an opportunity to enhance cooperation between the two countries for peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region.
President Yoon will arrive in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, where he will kick off his NATO-related engagements with bilateral talks with some members' leaders, including new entrants, Sweden and Finland, and the Czech Republic. On Thursday, he is expected to have a summit with the IP4 leaders. Also, after attending the NATO Summit itself, Yoon is set to give a speech at the NATO Public Forum before returning to Seoul. While the NATO members will address the prolonged war in Ukraine, the summit also comes against the backdrop of Russia and North Korea's strengthened military cooperation.
A strong message will be sent regarding the military cooperation between Russia and North Korea, and in response, there will be discussions on ways to strengthen cooperation between NATO allies and IP4 partners.
All in all, the presidential office said that the core concept of this trip is to strengthen South Korea's security through global cooperation. In fact, an official said that there will be an opportunity for just the IP4 members to send a message to Russia and North Korea to showcase the solidarity in the region. While the possibility of a trilateral summit between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo to follow up on the Camp David summit was raised, an official at the presidential office said that while it is open to all possibilities, it won't focus overwhelmingly on arranging one. In fact, the schedule is packed for this trip, and there are still opportunities for a summit throughout the rest of the year. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, also in Hawaii, South Korea's Navy is partaking in the world's largest multinational drill and also taking on a leadership role for the first time. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung is on site.
The Rim of the Pacific exercise, the world's largest international maritime drill, is currently underway in Hawaii. 29 nations, 40 surface ships, 3 submarines, over 150 aircraft, and more than 25,000 personnel are training in and around the Hawaiian Islands until August 1st. Hosted by the U.S. Third Fleet, the biennial RIMPAC exercise began in 1971 to ensure the safety and security of the world's oceans. RIMPAC 2024 is being held under the theme Partners, Integrated and Prepared. The aim is to build relationships, enhance interoperability, and contribute to peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. Taking part in this maritime exercise for the 18th time is South Korea. Around 840 sailors and Marines from South Korea arrived in Hawaii last month. The country deployed 2 guided missile destroyers, the Chunmugong Isunshin and Yulgog-i, as well as the Cheonjabong tank landing ship and the Ibomseok submarine. And for the very first time, a South Korean commander is serving as RIMPAC's Deputy Combined Force Maritime Component Commander.
I am successfully carrying out my duties as Deputy Commander of the Combined Forces Maritime Component Command in RIMPAC 2024. Through this exercise, we will raise the status of South Korea's Navy by improving Joint Force Command and performance capabilities.
The commander of U.S. Carrier Strike Group 1, which includes the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier the Carl Vinson, says South Korea's leadership role in RIMPAC sets another great example of interoperability.
Of course, very significant leadership by Captain Moon as the Deputy SIFMIC Commander to help direct all of our naval forces, not just my task force, but the amphibious forces, the maritime patrol forces, and everybody participating in the exercise. So a very significant opportunity, and great to see the Republic of Korea in that position.
Visitors from around the world came to Pearl Harbor to tour ships from different parts of the world. Almost 5,000 visited South Korea's vessels.
I always see the ship of Republic of Korea on the Instagram page, and I always admire that. And it's so good to be here in person today and to learn about the history and to be on the ship that is been at RIMPAC since 1990.
South Korea will be taking part in various drills until July 28th. Choi Min-dang, Arirang News, Hawaii.
And an American political scientist believes the Yoon administration has been advancing a brave campaign for global peace in the face of an aggressive geopolitical landscape. Our senior correspondent Oh Seong covers his remarks.
South Korea is emerging as a vital player in global security as President Yoon Suk-yeol takes, quote, courageous steps for peace and democracy amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Moscow's military collaboration with North Korea. That's according to Victor Cha, Senior Vice President for Asia at the Center of Strategic and International Studies. Speaking to Arirang News ahead of the NATO Summit this week, Cha spotlighted the role of South Korea in global security as the country was invited to the annual meeting for the 3rd consecutive year. The focus of the 3-day meeting in Washington, D.C. would inevitably be Ukraine. But more broadly, countries will address the strengthening alignment between authoritarian powers like Russia, North Korea, China and Iran, which blur the boundaries between Indo-Pacific and transatlantic security. NATO and its 4 Indo-Pacific partners, South Korea, Japan, Australia and New Zealand, plan to adopt a strong statement against Moscow's treaty with North Korea to aid each other militarily in the face of aggression.
So I think it's very clearly a direct threat in Europe because this collaboration is allowing Putin to use ammunition at very high rates on cities and civilians in Ukraine, as well as on the battlefield. This NATO summit, I think more than any other, will show how the 2 security theaters are connected. So just as allies in Asia like Japan and Korea have been helping to defend Ukraine, European partners will have to be critical supporters of peacetime deterrence in the Taiwan Strait, on the Korean Peninsula, in the South China Sea.
Cha said the IP4 countries and the G7 bloc could help bolster intelligence sharing and slap additional sanctions on Russia and North Korea, given the futility of such efforts in the UN Security Council, where Beijing and Moscow hold veto power. While there are no plans for a 3-way meeting between the leaders of South Korea, the US and Japan during the NATO summit, Yoon's office said Friday that it is open to all possibilities. Cha emphasized the need for a trilateral collective defense declaration against the Russia-North Korea axis.
I would hope that they make some sort of collective defense declaration, that the security of one is tied to the security of all. This is something that the United States has wanted the three allies to do for quite some time. For domestic political reasons, it's been difficult. But what happened between Putin and Kim really is kind of a clarifying moment in terms of geopolitics and geostrategy, and the allies need to assemble in response to that.
Going forward, as South Korea's role grows in global security, Cha acknowledged the need for bipartisan support for Yoon's foreign policy to become a responsible global actor that stands up for freedom, democracy, and human rights.
If Russia wins the war in Ukraine, and if China takes over Taiwan, neither of those things are good for South Korea. What we often like to say, and I don't know how true it is anymore, is that domestic politics stops at the water's edge, meaning that as much as political parties fight at home, once they're abroad, they're united. So obviously, it would be nice to see bipartisan support for South Korea's foreign policy.
He said Seoul is gaining recognition for its humanitarian assistance and wartime support for Ukraine and its plans to aid Kyiv in reconstructing the country.
So this really is Korea stepping out on a global stage. It's welcomed, I would say, by every country in the world to see Korea, the 12th largest economy in the world, playing this very important role. So I expect when Yoon goes to the NATO summit, I suspect he'll get a lot of respect from the European leaders for what he's been doing in Europe to help European security in defense of democracy. I think he'll get a lot of credit for that, and he deserves it. He's doing things that are pretty courageous. They're not popular domestically, but they appear to be things that he believes in, and that's what leaders do.
As a guest speaker at the NATO Public Forum, the South Korean leader is to express Seoul's commitment to leading efforts for peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and Europe as a key member of the free world. He is also expected to issue a strong warning about the growing alignment of Russia and North Korea and seek security cooperation on a global scale. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Korea's economic progress remains moderate despite tangible gains in exports amid a number of lingering internal and external risk factors. Our Park Kon-woo has more on the latest assessment by a local think tank.
South Korea's overall economic improvement remains somewhat modest despite exports recovering. That's according to the monthly economics trends report for July released on Monday by the Korea Development Institute, a state-run think tank. According to the report, exports jumped by over 5% on year in June, mainly due to robust shipments of ICT products. Though that was a smaller jump than the previous month due to fewer working days, export figures measured on a daily basis saw a bigger rise than May. And the country's trade balance saw a surplus of $8 billion in June, which was over $3 billion higher than the previous month, as overall imports shrank due to lower domestic demand. The KDI's report also showed that all industry production in May saw an on-year increase of 2.2%, down 1.1 percentage points from the month before. Despite strong performance for the chip sector exceeding 18% growth, lower production in automobiles and electrical equipment led to the weaker growth rate for total industrial production. And the think tank said the continuous high interest rates attributed to poor domestic demand. Retail sales in May fell by 3.1% on year, mainly due to low sales in automobiles and apparel. Investment for equipment and construction also both saw on-year drops. The KDI also mentioned external risk factors, including the volatility of oil prices due to geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, along with uncertainties in monetary policies globally. Park Kon-woo, Arirang News.
In other news, Korean airliners carried a record number of passengers on their national and international routes during the first half of this year. Data from Seoul's Transport Ministry show over 47 million passengers flying to their respective destinations on board Korea's 10 airline companies, up almost 30% on year. Fueling the trend are low-cost carriers such as Jeju Air and Jin Air that have been targeting passengers on short-haul destinations amid high inflation. Now, should this momentum continue into the latter half of the year, pundits believe the total number of passengers on domestic airliners will surpass pre-pandemic levels. The government is unveiling its latest measures in response to the prolonged walkout by doctors in training engaged in collective action against plans to boost medical school admissions quota. Our An Song-jin has the latest.
It's been 5 months since trainee doctors left their posts, but the medical community and the government are yet to resolve the prolonged medical dispute. Amid the continuing back and forth, the government is set to hold a meeting this afternoon, where the health minister will announce its final measures on those trainee doctors who left their positions. At the National Assembly hearing for the Health and Welfare Committee last month, the health minister pledged to draft a response plan based on the non-returning resident doctors. The government's announcement will mean that training hospitals can finalize their recruitment plans for the second half of the year. With the recruitment period set to start on September 1st, these hospitals need to know how many trainee doctors will return to their posts so that they can plan how many new residents to recruit. The government is looking to ease the return policy for those who have resigned so they can apply for the second half of the year. The current regulations prohibit residents who resign during their training period to return to the same position within a year. Last month, the government withdrew various orders issued to trainee doctors, such as deferring administrative procedures for medical license suspension, to allow some leeway for them to return. Most of these trainee doctors have already failed to fulfill the training period requirements needed to qualify for next year's specialist certification examinations. However, as of Thursday last week, only slightly over 1,000 trainee doctors of the 13,000 trainees were at work. This is only 8% of the total and only 91 more than before the government postponed the medical license suspension. It's been already over a month since the government finalized the increase of the medical school quota, but the dispute still shows no signs of ending soon. An Song-jin, Arirang News.
Over in France, the left-wing coalition is taking the most seats in the parliament after voting on Sunday kept the country's far right away from power. Yet given the absence of a tangible majority, pundits say France has been thrown into an unprecedented scenario. Our Choi Soo-young explains.
France's left-wing coalition, the New Popular Front, has won 182 seats in the country's National Assembly, making it the largest party, but short of the 289 required for an absolute majority. The far-right National Rally took 143 seats and finished third, while Macron's Centrist Ensemble Alliance recovered strongly from disappointment a week earlier to win 163 seats. The first round of parliamentary elections on June 30th saw France's far-right National Rally won 33.2% of the vote, while a coalition of left-wing parties, the New Popular Front, finished second. French President Emmanuel Macron's Ensemble Alliance finished third. Experts analyzing the results following voting on Sunday say that French voters are still cautious about the far right, and that appears to have driven a turnaround in fortunes compared to the week before. And with no majority, the French parliament becomes a hung parliament, putting France in political limbo with no clear path to forming a new government. That may be all the more crucial as France is just days away from an appearance at a major NATO summit in Washington and just 3 weeks out from the start of the Paris Summer Olympic Games. Prime Minister Gabriel Attal, long considered Macron's protege, announced he would resign from his post on Monday morning. In what seems to be a veil swipe on Macron's decision to call for a snap election, Attal said he didn't choose for the French parliament to be dissolved. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. US President Joe Biden continued to campaign in Pennsylvania on Sunday as Democratic lawmakers debated the future of his candidacy following a primetime television interview on Friday that further fueled uncertainty. Biden attended 2 campaign events in the key swing state of Pennsylvania on Sunday, while fellow ranking Democrats convened a meeting on Sunday afternoon, led by House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, that reportedly included discussion on the future of Biden's candidacy. According to CBS, 4 of those at the meeting said that Biden should drop out, while other sources added that at least 3 expressed concerns for the Democratic turnout in November. Biden's primetime TV interview with ABC on Friday once again showed the visibly aged president struggling to answer questions, which exacerbated concerns following last week's poor debate performance against Donald Trump. California Representative Adam Schiff said on Sunday that he blames Biden's age for his devastating performance, urging him to seek advice from his team with distance and objectivity and decide himself whether he is the right Democratic candidate. Now to Gaza, where an Israeli airstrike on a church-run school killed 4 people on Sunday, including a senior Hamas-appointed government official. According to Hamas sources, on the same day, Ihab al-Hussein, the Deputy Minister of Labor, was killed at the Holy Family School in the west of Gaza City, where a large number of people were taking shelter. The Israel Defense Forces said it carried out a strike on the area of a school where they say terrorists were operating and hiding. Israel has targeted and killed others from the Hamas administration in the past 9 months of war, including the Deputy Culture Minister, senior police officers, and the Deputy Speaker of the Council. An Israeli airstrike against UNRWA school in Gaza on Saturday also killed at least 16 people. In Iran's presidential race, moderate candidate Masoud Pezeshkian has won the country's runoff vote. He beat hardline former nuclear negotiator Saeed Jalili. The result was announced by the country's Interior Ministry on Saturday. Pezeshkian, who is seen as a centrist, reform-minded candidate, won some 16.4 million votes of around 30 million votes cast, while Jalili received some 13.5 million, according to the official count. Pezeshkian said on Saturday that his victory will usher in a new chapter for the country. While the position of president in Iran has minimal authority in making policy decisions, the president will be closely involved in selecting the successor to Iran's 85-year-old supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Spain's annual festival of San Fermin began as the clock struck midnight on July 7th, with thousands gathered in Pamplona's main square. The San Fermin crowd, dressed in traditional white outfits and red scarves, waited until noon on Sunday for the start of the famous running of the bulls. The runs showcase 6 purpose-bred fighting bulls weighing between 500 and 630 kilograms, chasing runners through the narrow streets of Pamplona's Old Quarter over an 800-meter stretch. According to officials, medical reports indicated 6 injuries, including 1 due to goring, with injured participants transported to hospital. Kim Xiang, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Heavy monsoon rain is lashing down on many parts of Korea today. The central regions, Jeollado and Gyeongsangdo province, need to brace for downpours. And throughout the day, the capital area and Gyeongsang-Pukto province could see up to 120 millimeters of torrential rain. So rain alerts in central regions should expand to more parts of the country, and that's including here in Seoul. Meanwhile, Chungcheongdo and Gyeongsang-Pukto provinces are under caution, the third highest on the landslide alerts 4-tier scale. Now, temperature-wise, Seoul gets up to 27 degrees, but many southern provinces remain under heat advisories. Daegu had a tropical night and should see a high of 31 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Meanwhile, Busan and nearby areas will see spotty to no rain today. Jeju will be under sunny skies this afternoon with a high of 34 degrees Celsius. We have a frequent monsoon rain in the forecast this week across Korea. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
Right, and those are the headlines at this hour here in Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session, so do stay with us. Thank you for now.